failure is there to teach us something, not something to identify with, but really it is an opportunity to learn, to grow, to change, and to better understand what does happiness and love even mean.
Welcome to Stories and Stanza, a weekly podcast bringing you real stories from creators and speakers around the world. Hi, Janelle, and welcome to Stories and Stanza. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. And before we proceed, could you briefly tell us about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Abra. Well, my name is Jeanell. I am a relationship coach. I live in Vancouver, Canada, with my husband of 18 years. And I believe that it has been my life purpose to bring love and healing to families and marriage. I've also had a very traumatic childhood, like many people. And I believe a lot of the reason why we can't have healthy, loving relationships is because we haven't healed from our past, from our childhood, from our heartbreak, from stories and beliefs that we were told about relationships, about ourselves, about love and family. And so I I love talking about forgiveness and compassion and the importance of empathy, because at the end of the day, we're all human. We have all gone through our lives with extraordinary experiences that have made us who we are. I don't believe in good people or bad people. I believe that we are all the same. And when we can see each other for our own humanity and that we are actually a lot more the same than we think we are, I think we can now create more love and understanding and less fear of love, because I believe that that is what's happening in the world. I believe that we're becoming more afraid of love, and we start to think that being loneliness or being alone is the answer as a way to protect ourselves from being hurt. But I think a lot of us, we're starting to realize that that is the death, really. And that is not what we were made for. We were made to love. We were made to be in, to connect, to share, to love, to be in community. And I am just so committed that the future generations that are going to be coming after us have the opportunity to really express love at a different level. But it really starts with us healing ourselves so that we can be the teachers and the leaders and the role models for our future generations. So that's really what I'm about.
Thank you so much. And what you just said, I cannot emphasize how deeply that resonates with me and some of the ideas behind the podcast. And uh, one of the reasons why I started this podcast is to spread that healing, that understanding of healing, the compassion, and uh, the awareness around it. Okay. And I have called this particular segment Fail With Me, which is a little bit sarcastic, but it is not to impose any negativity, but to reflect upon ourselves and unpack what failures are telling us. Okay. So the
Mm-hmm.
first thing I wanted to ask you is, how does that sound to you? The title, the idea of Fail With Me.
I love it, because I think part of the reason why we fail at relationships is because we fail to actually say what's there for us. And so the one thing that we fear the most, which is being alone, is basically we're like sabotaging ourselves. It's the one thing we don't want, and yet we have these behaviors and ways of thinking that make sure that we stay alone. We almost like guarantee that we will always be alone because of that. And so Fail With Me, I think, is a great title, because until we realize, first of all, that failure is there to teach us something, not to not something to identify with, but really it is an opportunity to learn, to grow, to change, and to better understand what does happiness and love even mean? And I don't think you can get to those levels until you realize what it's not. And the only way you know what it's not is you got to fail. You got to realize that, oh, that's not it. And I think so many of us have brought grown up, especially even me, have grown up that failure is bad or that it means something about who we are as humans, when really failure is just a desire that was not met, a goal that was not met. It did not make, if we're saying the goal is go from A to B, it didn't get to B. But it doesn't mean anything about us. It doesn't mean we're stupid, that we're, all these stories that we make up, that we're not good enough, we're not worthy. And I think when we can really look at failure as a lesson, it really empowers us to actually be okay with failure.
That is precisely the idea behind Fail With Me. So thank you for sharing that. Uh, to start our discussion today, can I ask you to tell us? You briefly shared that how you had trauma in the past, but now you're working as a relationship coach. So how did that transformation happen? How did you get started on this path? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, in my former life, I was a corporate executive sales manager. I traveled the world. I won free trips. I made a lot of money. I lived the life that I thought I was supposed to live. And yet I was unhappy. I was miserable. And I started to really question my path. And for 20 years, I thought I knew exactly how my life was going to go. And then I realized, even though everything, I checked all the boxes, yet there was something missing. And so I actually quit my job. I hired a coach to help me figure out who is the next version of Janelle that I'm meant to be. And in that work, I realized that that's what I wanted to do for other people. But it actually was before that. When I was 9 years old, so I had a great family. My parents were in love. I had really great role models. But then when I was 9, um, my dad had an affair and he cheated on my mom with my mom's friend and he got her pregnant and he left. And I remember that day very, very vividly. I was in my bedroom playing. I think it was nighttime and I think it was winter. And my mom called the kids into the living room, and there was me, my brother, who was 3, and my sister was about 6 at this time. And when I came into the living room, there was my mom standing there beside my dad and 2 sets of luggage. And my mom says to us kids, she says, "Kids, your dad is leaving. He doesn't love us anymore." And I looked at my dad and he didn't say anything. And he turned around and he left. And I watched him go down the stairs because our main door was on the second floor. So I watched him go down the stairs. And I remember thinking to myself, is this a joke? Because my dad was a jokester. I thought to myself, is this a joke? And as he started to leave and I saw him walk into this brown car, I realized later on that that 9-year-old had made 3 decisions subconsciously. And I was a daddy's girl too, so it was extra painful for me. But I decided that I was unlovable. I can't trust people, and everybody I love will leave me. And until I got married to my first husband, and that relationship went really, really badly. And that is when I started to do the work. I started to get really interested in personal development because I started to ask myself, what is it about me that I keep having these relationships? These, I dated a lot of, I like the bad boys, the bad boys. I never liked the nice guy. I always wanted the bad boy. And they were men that my parents never liked. And so it was inside of that work that I did that I realized, like, oh, okay, my 9-year-old self has not healed from my father leaving because my dad actually came back. So he was gone for a couple of years and he got sick and he came home and he asked my mom to take care of him because he couldn't work. And he was on a transplant list for new kidney. So he was at home and he asked my mom for forgiveness. And my mom said yes. And she took him home. She took care of him. She never talked about it. She truly, truly let it go. And so my dad passed away about 13 years later. And so in my mind, I thought, we had the happy ending. Everything is great. We were loving and supportive, and we had peace when he left. So I didn't really think that there was any trauma. But when I went into my first marriage and things weren't going well, and then I started doing the personal development, that was when I realized, like, no, 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 this is not over. There's still so much for me to deal with. And on top of that, when I was a kid, I used to be bullied a lot. Even my dad's nickname for me when I was a kid was ugly. That's my dad's nickname for me. And so I think there was a lot of trauma and a lot of experiences in my life that had me feel like I was unlovable and that people were dangerous. And I kind of tried to be someone I wasn't. And what I mean by that is try to be the happy person. Don't let anybody know what's really going on with me, right? Never admit if I'm upset. I just like people just, I've had this mask, the mask,
Yes.
until it got to a point where I really kind of had a breakdown and I realized like, this isn't working. And so that's how I got really passionate about self development, healing myself. And then I started to coach. And then I decided I wanted to be a coach. And then I left corporate and decided that, and at the same time that I was leaving corporate, I started to get these spiritual messages, I guess is the best way to describe it. And I'd never experienced anything like that. And so even though I was so afraid to do this thing that I knew I needed to do, um, it was really scary, but I also knew that that was what was next for me without any doubt in my mind. And it was really hard because I've always been someone who did well, made lots of money, always successful. And now I was doing this new thing that I've never done before, had no idea where to begin, had like no clue. And I was so afraid. And also, of course, I started to think, oh, okay, well, maybe I can do this, but I would fail and then fail and then fail and then fail. And of course, I would say, that's it. I can't do this anymore. I'm no good. But there was always something that just kept saying, Janelle, keep going, keep going, keep going. And so, here I am 5 years later and creating things that I never thought I would create and making the difference that I never thought I could make. And having this intuitive, divine, godly backup almost, like support that I always feel has helped me get over those times when I questioned myself. Is this really what I'm here for? Is this really it? Maybe you have it wrong. Maybe it was supposed to be somebody else. But, no matter how much I try to convince myself that why me, I realize like I've been chosen. And I know that sounds maybe a little bit too woo woo or too, spiritual, but that's my truth. And sometimes, when I'm in a session with people, I don't know what I'm saying. It's almost like it just kind of comes out. And I just sort of follow that instinct and it's always 100%. And so I feel like I'm doing work that is making a difference in the world. And I especially love working with men. There's something about me and men that we have such a deep connection. I don't know if it's from my father. I don't know if it's because my own husband and the relationship I have with him, and the ability that I've had to understand men at a deeper level than most women. But it's very common for me to meet a man on a consult for the first time, and within 5 seconds, they're in tears. They can't hold their emotions back, and they trust me. And so I think I feel very honored to be someone who can listen and love people at a deep level that most of us are unable to love other people. But it really has to start with me loving myself. And like many people, I'm very hard on myself. And so I have to continuously forgive and bring grace and patience and reconnect to my God, for him to remind me that it's okay. It's okay to fail. It's okay to not know what the future looks like. It's okay. And so, yeah.
First of all, I must say that that deeply touched me. And I think you are doing a wonderful job giving people that support system, and they can trust you and they can open up and they can find a bright path forward. And if I may share, like that is one of the reasons I am doing this podcast as well. That I had a few difficult years, and I've been married for 15 plus years, and we had a daughter, and then we moved to Australia, and then my wife went through a very difficult phase, which I didn't know what it was back then. And I kept running from one doctor to another. Like she had different visions and different sort of very deep kind of rooted depression that none of the doctors could really identify what it was. And I was really, really struggling. And it had taken me a lot of like going round in circles and from one doctor to another. Gradually, when one of the psychiatrists was able to uh, diagnose what was going on and assist her, and it took like about 4 or 5 bright years from our life in that struggle. But I was constantly thinking, what is going wrong and what is it that I am missing? And then when she gradually started getting better, I came across a book that explained what she was going through. And many women apparently go through that after their childbirth. It's called postpartum psychosis. And I realized that it was like textbook scenario. She slowly started understanding what she was going through, and she came out of it. And then I realized that I have to open up and I have to talk about it and create awareness, and which is what set me on this journey of podcast and discovery and creating awareness. So I can definitely relate to what you were saying previously. Now, moving on to our discussion. So in today's world, we see a lot of broken relationships. So as a coach, I wanted to hear from you. What do you think we are missing?
Yeah. So many things. The first thing, though, that comes to my mind is that we have this belief that if we find the right person, wherever we feel broken and unloved will be made healed. And so we put so much pressure on somebody else to heal our own brokenness without actually us doing the work to heal ourselves. And so what I find is, couples will come to me struggling. And, for example, the woman will say, well, what I need from you is your reassurance. I need to know that, everything's going to be okay and that you love me. And the man will say, but I do. But you don't listen, you don't hear me. And then she says, well, because you're not saying the right thing and it doesn't make me feel better. And so he says, okay, well, then what do you want me to say? Tell me what you need. And then she says, well, you should know. And so it's like we don't, we are not willing to take the responsibility for what it is going on for us and asking for what it is that we want. And so in that scenario with this woman, I said to her, I said, how can he give you what you want when you don't even know what you want? And how can he win in your heart? How can he win your heart when you haven't told him how to play? You haven't given him instruction. So, for example, with my husband, when I can tell when I'm not present. You know, we're in our head, we're thinking about something, maybe something happened during our day. A lot of times we don't communicate that. We kind of pull away. And then our partner will say something like, "Hey, are you okay?" And then we say, "We're fine. I'm fine." But really there's something going on. And so we communicate to our partner everything is okay, and yet we're not okay. So the only thing our partner is left with is, oh, it must be something I'm doing wrong, or that they're no longer interested in me. So we make up all these stories because we're not communicating. So for me, with my husband, for example, in that scenario, he'll say to me, because he knows me, he knows me so well, he knows my face. So he'll say to me, "Are you okay? What's going on? I noticed you're not paying attention," or whatever he says. And I'll say to him, "You know what? You're right. I'm dealing with this thing about work and I'm not present and I'm sorry. And I just want you to know it's not about you. It's not personal. It's my thing." And so I am taking full ownership of how I'm showing up. And so then he doesn't have to worry about me. He can say, "Oh, okay. Do you need something? Can I help?" And I said, "No, honey, I just need space." Okay. So now the bond, the trust bond is intact. But most of us don't know how to communicate and be vulnerable. We think vulnerability is weakness. And the one of the things my husband has taught me is how powerful it is to open your heart and just say what is there, and to let go of the ego. The ego will always convince us that we're alone and that no one understands us and that we're different. And we have to continuously deal with that every day. But if we're not aware, if we don't do the work, if all we do is we try to numb out the pain with drugs, with alcohol, with food, with Netflix, whatever it is we do to numb out the thing that's there that's bothering us, the more distant we are going to become from other people. So I think, to answer your question, what's missing is vulnerability, ownership,
Communication?
communication,
Sorry, I interrupted you. You were saying compassion, vulnerability.
compassion. Yeah. And I think communication, but specifically the listening piece. We don't know how to listen. We only know how to fix, to change, to interrupt, to criticize, to judge, but just to listen without any input is hard, because especially for men want to fix the problem. And emotions are not something to fix. They're just something to be with, to examine, to reflect, because our emotions are our compass. They're trying to tell us something. But many of us were taught that emotions are bad. And so we just try to avoid it, pretend it's not there, deny. And then it builds up, and then we become depressed. And then we wonder why we don't feel well. And then that depression and that that stifling of emotions usually manifests itself in some sort of disease, illness, physically. I believe that's where cancer comes from, is when we don't take care of our emotional well-being.
Very, very true. And emotional intelligence is one of the key subjects that I am exploring in this
Yeah.
podcast. As it, you said something that in a relationship, in when someone is in not in the right phase, and instead of healing themselves, they kind of expect something will magically, change things. But the healing begins with oneself, right? So I,
Mhm.
I wanted to hear your thoughts in the healing journey. So if someone is troubled, if someone is not coping well, and as you also mentioned that there are all these distractions and everything, but that healing that kind of need to come from our core, that's not happening. So how can what should someone look at when they're going through that phase?
Yeah. There's two things that come to my mind. Recently I've realized that my ultimate goal in my life is to have peace. Peace within myself, peace with my God, peace with the people that I love. And part of that peace, or the on the flip side of peace, is struggle and resistance and pain and suffering. And so I have this quote that I love. I don't even know where I heard it. I don't even know if I made it up, but it goes like this: pain and suffering only exist when you resist what is so. And so when we have it like who we are, or the world, or our partner, or our children, or our finances shouldn't be this way. There's all this resistance, right? All this judgment and resistance. That is what creates the suffering. And so I believe that the first thing we need to do is we need to just get to a point of acceptance. My body is the way it is. My husband is the way he is. My children are the way they are. My finances are the way they are. It just is, without judgment, without right, wrong, good, bad. It just is. So from a place of neutrality, now we can start to look at it in an from an empowered state, with nothing to change, nothing to fix. I think that's the first step, is really, how can I be with what is right now is what's right now? I've been listening to a lot of spiritual podcasts lately. And one of the themes I keep hearing is, consider that everything that has happened to you, both good and bad, where your life is, where your purpose is now, is exactly what is meant to be. There is no mistake. God makes no mistakes. But yet we tell ourselves, oh, this shouldn't be this way. I think God got it wrong. Oh, maybe God forgot about me. Or maybe I'm being punished. Rather than, well, okay, if this was meant to be, if everything right now is perfect, and this was always the design of my life, and if I trusted that, how can I move forward in that? How can I see this empowered, in an empowered state? Because here's the thing: peace, right, is acceptance. But the part of peace that people really struggle with is giving up that anything is wrong. And so this is why forgiveness and compassion are so important. But so many of us, I think, especially in, at least, I'm Filipino. And I think a lot of times our culture, you know, um, we're very hard on ourselves. There's very little space for compassion. It's like, you did that wrong. Oh, you're bad. But it's like, no, you know what? I'm human. And it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. It's okay that this person doesn't want to be with me anymore. It's okay. But it's really hard because our ego will continue to fight us on that. Or the beliefs that we were told as children, that men are liars or women are whatever, right? Just all these judgments. And I think we just need to be able to know who we are authentically and know our value, But I believe, and I see from being a coach, most people don't even know what they want in their life. They don't know their values. They don't know who they are. And so their foundation is weak. And so I think that's really where it starts, is getting that foundation really strong, to know and love yourself, who you are, and to forgive, be able to forgive yourself and have compassion. Because then when you know it for yourself, it's so much easier to show forgiveness and compassion to others.
Very, very well said, Janelle. Uh, and it is true that we are sometimes so hard on ourselves. And uh, what I feel is that the social dynamics in today's day and age is changing so rapidly. What it was in our previous generation, what it is now, and what we are living for our next generation is changing so rapidly. And
Right. And now with social media, there's
yes,
so much information that we can't even, again, if you don't know your value, you don't know who you are, you're just going to say, you're just going to allow all of that in, even if it's not good.
exactly. One of these questions in relationship space I've heard from my listeners, and which is where I wanted to hear your thoughts around it. Like, there are these broken relationships, and you said it is okay that if a one relationship doesn't work, to accept and move on. But a lot of times when we move on, we carry that brokenness with us.
Yes, we do.
And what do you feel about that? What do you suggest we can do better when we are
Yeah.
going through something like that?
Again, going back to ownership, I think, I have, like I said, I've been married twice. And in my first marriage, I blamed him for my unhappiness. I blamed him for not being the husband that he promised he would be. And, but when I really think about it and when I took ownership, I realized, I have been judgmental. I have been mean. No one held a gun to my head to marry this guy. I chose that. And so I think it is so important for us to do the work on ourselves, to love ourselves, especially when relationships don't work. Because it's so easy to point the finger out there and not take responsibility. But to your point, if we don't take responsibility and are aware of our ownership of what we did wrong, and not from a place of blame, but just yeah, you know what? I did that. We're going to keep repeating the same habits into the next relationship. This is why people get married 4 or 5 times, because they haven't learned, because they think that the problem is out there, but they are the common denominator, right? And it's hard to look in the mirror. It's hard to admit our flaws in our humanness, because again, we were taught that that's bad and that's shameful and then you should feel guilt. And you can feel those things, but they don't help you. They don't bring love in your life. They bring no joy. They bring no healing. And so it's easy to get trapped in the judgment and suffering and resistance and wrong making and regret and resentment that so many people get stuck in. And then they take their children with them. And then their children see this and they go, oh, is that how it is? Okay. And so we keep passing on these bad habits to our
From one
kids.
layer to another.
Yeah,
Yeah.
generational. So this is why it's really important for us to do the work, to be the best version of ourselves so that we can be teachers to our children, because they are watching us, everything. And even when we're not speaking, they're still watching us. They see how we move, they see our energy, they see our mood, and they absorb all that. And I believe it's our job as parents to create a safe space for our children where they feel loved and safe. And I think when we allow ourselves to go out of control emotionally, that really ruins the feeling of safety. And I would say to you, 99% of my clients who come to me for relationship issues, it is always something to do with their childhood that's in the way.
Mm, very
Even infidelity.
Uh, Thank you for your insights on what are some of the challenges in today's world. And you very rightfully said and pinpointed some of the areas that, I believe we are lacking, and we need to hear that more often. And this
Yeah.
relationship space is so huge, so vast that, I mean, I guess we can talk about it for days without stopping. Uh, I wanted to ask you from healing point of view that what are some of the elements of self-awareness that we should all bring into the relationship space? You talked about compassion, you talked about communication, you talked about vulnerability. I'm just trying to put that all together as to bring that in relation to our day-to-day struggles in relationship space, that we are not truly self-aware. What do we do? How do we turn things around? What is the pivot that we need to sort of do in that area?
Yeah. I think, if I were to summarize it, I think it is all about returning to who we are authentically. Because when we know who we are authentically, we're going to communicate. We're going to notice when we're not being kind, when we are being judgmental. We'll notice, we can feel in our body when something is not right. We start to listen to our intuition. But I think, over time, especially as adults, we stop trusting that. We stop, we use our brain way too much and not enough of our heart. And so we try to make logical sense of each other, of love, of, everything needs an explanation. And it doesn't. It really does. If it's all about being happy and healing the past, I think it really is knowing who we are, but also realizing that what happened to us, the painful things that have happened to our life isn't who we are. It's not our identity. For the longest time, I used to identify that, who I am is broken because my dad left me, because people bullied me. I'm broken. Therefore, I'm broken. And it took a lot of work for me to realize that I don't have to identify with that. In fact, I don't have to identify with anything. It used to be like, okay, I'm a good girl. I'm a good daughter. I'm a worker. I'm successful. I'm whatever. Right. And so we almost like put these labels on ourselves. Am I a good person? Am I a bad person? Am I nice? Am I unkind? What am I? And I've found that the more that we can release ourselves from all of these, almost like compartmentalizing ourselves, the more freedom and and the more space we have to create. So, for example, what that might be is, you know what? Who I am is all of these things. I'm love. I am Janelle. I am a wife. I am a daughter. I am all these things. And yet I'm none of those things. I am everything, and yet I am nothing. Right? Because when we say, well, I'm a good person, now there's all of this need to be perfect, which is, of course, an illusion. Or I'm a bad person, therefore I don't deserve love. So when we do this judgment thing, there's no space to create anything except that. And we get stuck. And so I think if we're looking to expand, if we're looking to grow, if we're looking to change, we actually have to just let go and create into the future of who we want to become, rather than getting stuck with, well, who I was is I'm a mother, I'm a divorcee, I'm a I'm someone who was abandoned when I was 5 years old. That's not it. And it is who we are, and it's made us who we are, but we don't have to use that and identify that into creating who we are in the future. And so I think we get sometimes stuck in that. And I would love to say it's black and white, and here's the prescription, and just take these 2 pills and call me in the morning. But, I've been doing this work for 22 years, and I still am discovering new things about myself that I didn't even realize every single day. And so for me, recently, my newest revelation was just how much I feel like I need to have it all right, how I need to be perfect. And so I'm right now being trained and developed in becoming a speaker. And so in my mind, I think a great speaker has to have it all together. She cannot say, she has to know exactly what's going on. She has to be confident, but it's very rigid. And what I'm discovering is that if I can just let go of trying to be perfect, trying to say the right thing, and just speak from my heart, that's really what a great speaker does. But this thing of having to get it right, knowing all the words exactly how it's going to go, I get stuck in that. I get caught in that. And I notice how that shows up in my life. And I also notice how I feel like I need to control everything. I need to control how people behave. I need to control what comes out of my mouth. I need to control, like, there's this need for control because there's a fear, right? There's a fear behind that. And so I'm still also discovering for myself newly things about myself. But I think that's the beauty of it is when you do that work, when you are willing to stop and just go within and see what's there, and then you see it, now you can do something about it. But if you're so stuck in guilt and shame and regret and I'm not worthy, I don't deserve, I'm not enough, there is no space for that wisdom to come through.
Absolutely. You are so interesting to hear and to explore these ideas. Now, one thing I wanted to ask on behalf of listeners is that can the listeners work with you if once they listen to the episode, can they reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can find me at janellegreen.com. Or an easier way to find me is you can Google me, or you can go to saveourmarriage.ca.
Yeah, I will put all this in the episode description so that they can find you. I wanted to hear from you is that, are you willing to uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
uh
I absolutely can do. I do strategy sessions, or if you just want to meet and just talk and have a question, you can book a call with me from my website.
fantastic. I will get those details from you and I will put them in episode description. Uh, to conclude our discussion, we touched upon a wide range of subjects, and uh, each are very valid perspective to explore. I wanted to ask you that, uh, to conclude the whole thing, what is it something that you would say to one who's going through these challenges?
Mm. Be your own best friend. When we can give that level of love and compassion and patience to ourselves, it makes it so much easier for us to give that to other people. But again, I think we're so hard on ourselves. And when we can say, hey, you know what, Janelle, you did your best and you're a good person and everything is going to work out. And just to be that kind to it rather than you didn't do it right. You're so stupid. You should have done that. What's wrong with you? Like all these things that maybe people had said to us as children are playing our tape and we get stuck in that. And so, if people want to work with me, part of the work is really looking at is it real? Is this true? These things that we think about ourselves, are they true? Is it true that you don't deserve love? How do you know that? How do you know it's true? How do you know it's not true? And so to really bring critical thinking into the emotional aspects, because I think a lot of people just feel so many things, right? We put so much emphasis on the emotion, but we can actually bring critical thinking into that. So like one of the ones that I used to have, and it still sometimes comes up, is, my family's from the Philippines. My mom was the only one who left the Philippines, came to Canada. And so there's always this feeling of almost like guilt that I'm here living this really extraordinary life, and the rest of my family is there struggling. And so there was always this voice in my head that always said, who do you think you are? And it's almost like a how dare you? Who do you think you are? And it used to really catch me. It used to hook me. And then I started to really, well, who do I think I am? I know who I am. I am someone who is here to make a difference in the world. But most of us, we get stuck in the I don't deserve. Who do you think you are? We get stuck there, and that's it. That's the end of it. But we don't keep going and going, well, what if I did deserve it? And who says that I don't deserve it? Who says I'm unworthy? I do. Said that. No one else said it to me. But again, we don't go that far. We stop halfway through and we don't actually go through the whole way because we were never taught how to do that. And so that's why it's really great to have someone to work through that. So that fear, that thing that holds us back from truly opening our hearts and experiencing love, experiencing acceptance, experiencing vulnerability and connection with another human, right? When we can deal with that, a whole new life opens up for us.
So very well said. That is such an heartwarming conclusion that we could give to this great discussion. Thank you once again for taking the time and talk to me and the audience on Stories and Stanza. You are absolutely delight to talk to, and I would love to have you as a guest again, maybe sometime.
I love that.